Arun was a quiet boy who never looked for attention. At 17, he seemed like any other teenager in his small town. He went to school, helped his mother at home, and spent most of his evenings in the backyard, reading books or practicing exercises his late father had once taught him. To most people, Arun was simply a shy boy who preferred silence over noise. But there was more to him than anyone knew. His father, Ravi, had been a disciplined man. He had worked as a trainer, teaching both physical strength and mental discipline to young students in the city. Arun was only 12 when his father passed away, but the lessons had stayed. Ravi always told him, "Strength is not just for the body, Arun. It is for the heart. A strong person controls anger, protects others, and never misuses power." Those words were like a light inside Arun's heart, guiding him even after his father was gone. Arun's mother, Meena, worked long hours as a tailor. She was gentle, soft-spoken, and full of kindness. But she worried about Arun. He didn't have many friends, and he rarely spoke about his feelings. Sometimes she found him in the small shed at night, practicing moves with a wooden stick, copying the training his father had once given him. She would watch silently, not wanting to disturb him. Deep inside, she knew it was his way of holding on to his father's memory. At school, Arun blended in like a shadow. He wasn't weak, but he never tried to prove himself. When other boys played rough, he stayed aside. When laughter spread across the classroom, he only smiled quietly. Teachers often said he was respectful, focused, and polite, but none of them guessed the quiet strength resting inside him. The town itself had changed over the years. It was once peaceful, but now a group of bikers often roamed the streets. Their loud engines echoed through the narrow lanes, and people shut their windows whenever they appeared. Shops closed early, and parents warned their children not to wander too far. The bikers weren't part of the community, they came from nearby areas, yet they had made the town their playground. Arun noticed this change. He saw how fear lived in people's eyes when they heard the roar of engines. He saw his mother pulling the curtains quickly whenever the bikes passed their street. He never said anything, but inside, his chest tightened. He remembered his father's words about courage. True courage is not shown by fists. It is shown by standing firm when others feel fear. One evening, after finishing his schoolwork, Arun sat in the backyard. The sun had set, and the orange glow of twilight painted the sky. He picked up a wooden stick, moving it slowly, practicing balance and focus. Every swing was careful, steady, and calm. He wasn't preparing for a fight, he was preparing for life. That same night, Meena sat beside him on the steps. "Arun," she said softly, "you spend so much time with these exercises. Your father would be proud." Arun looked down at the stick in his hands. "I don't want to forget, Ma. He taught me so much. If I stop, it will feel like he's gone completely." Her eyes grew wet, but she smiled. "He is not gone. He lives in you." For a long moment, they sat in silence, listening to the distant hum of the night. Arun didn't know then how soon those lessons would be tested. The next day was ordinary at first. He walked to school with his bag slung over his shoulder, greeting the shopkeepers on the way. At lunch, he sat in his usual corner, quietly eating while others laughed and played. On his way back home, though, he heard the sound of engines rumbling in the distance. Arun froze. The bikers. He stepped aside, letting the roaring machines pass, their headlights flashing and their laughter filling the street. People quickly moved indoors. A little boy who had been playing with a ball ran into his mother's arms. Arun watched silently, his fists tightening around the strap of his bag. One of the bikers slowed down, eyeing him curiously. Arun lowered his gaze and kept walking, calm and unbothered. But the biker smirked, whispering something to his companions before speeding away. That small moment was the beginning. Arun didn't know it yet, But fate was pulling him into a storm. The bikers had noticed him not because he looked strong, but because he looked quiet. To them, quietness meant weakness. And they always searched for someone who seemed easy to scare. That night, as Arun lay in bed, he thought of his father again. Strength is not for showing off, his father's voice echoed in his mind. But when the time comes, never be afraid to stand tall. He didn't understand why the memory felt so heavy that night. He didn't understand why sleep felt distant, as though the air itself carried a warning. But deep in his heart, he sensed it, change was coming. And soon, the quiet boy that everyone ignored would no longer be invisible. The next morning, life in town seemed the same, but there was a quiet uneasiness that many people carried in their hearts. The bikers had become a shadow over their daily lives. Shopkeepers hurried to close earlier than before, children no longer played freely on the streets, and neighbors whispered about when the gang might show up again. For Arun, the world looked unchanged on the surface. He still went to school, helped his mother, and spent evenings in the backyard. But deep inside, he felt a weight growing heavier each day. The look one of the bikers had given him yesterday stayed in his mind. It wasn't just curiosity, it was the look of someone who had chosen their next target. At breakfast, his mother placed a simple plate of bread and lentils on the table. "Eat well, Arun," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She had heard the bikes late last night, too. Their noise had rattled the windows, and she knew what it meant for the safety of the town. Arun ate quietly. He didn't want to worry her more, but he could feel her gaze lingering on him. Finally, she spoke softly, "You walk alone every day. If you ever feel something is wrong, come home quickly. Do not stop anywhere." He nodded. "I'll be careful, Ma." Her words reminded him of his father's teaching. His father never told him to run away from fear, but he also taught him not to look for fights. Arun respected that balance. He didn't want to fight anyone. But he couldn't ignore the way the town was changing. Fear was spreading, and it hurt him to see good people living in silence. After school that day, Arun didn't walk straight home. Instead, he stopped by the small shop of Mr. Kumar, an old friend of his father. The shop sold fruits and vegetables, and Mr. Kumar was like an uncle to him. As soon as Arun entered, he saw Mr. Kumar's worried face. "You should not be out this late, Arun," Mr. Kumar said, looking out at the road. "Those bikers, they trouble everyone. Just last week, they shouted at a young boy for no reason. The poor child has refused to step outside since then." Arun lowered his eyes. "Why doesn't anyone stop them?" The old man sighed. "Because they are loud, fearless, and move together. People are scared. No one wants trouble." He paused, then placed a hand on Arun's shoulder. "Don't carry this burden on yourself, son. You are young. Let the elders handle it." But Arun knew there was no elder strong enough to stand against them. The police rarely came to the side of town, and when they did, the bikers were nowhere to be found. It was as if the gang knew exactly when to disappear. As Arun walked home, the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the road. He could hear the faint sound of engines in the distance. His heart tightened, but he kept walking steadily. That evening, as usual, he practiced in the backyard. His movements were sharp yet calm, his breathing steady. He remembered how his father used to correct his stance: feet firm, back straight, eyes open. Each move carried memory, discipline, and quiet strength. Meena watched from the doorway, her sewing work paused in her lap. She didn't say anything, but she wondered if these exercises would one day become more than just a way for her son to remember his father. Would they become the very thing that kept him safe? The thought scared her, yet it also gave her a strange sense of comfort. Later that night, a loud roar broke the stillness of the town. The bikers had come again. From the window, Arun and his mother watched as the gang sped past their street, laughing and revving their engines. One of them threw an empty bottle onto the road, the crash echoing in the silence. Meena pulled the curtains shut quickly. "Stay away from them, Arun," she whispered, almost to herself. Arun didn't reply. He simply sat in the corner of his room afterward, staring at the wooden stick leaning against the wall. He knew the bikers had noticed him once. He wondered when they would notice him again. The following days passed with growing tension. At school, some students spoke about how the bikers had scared an old fruit seller, tipping over his cart just for amusement. Others whispered about how one boy was chased for a block before he managed to escape. The stories spread fear, but also anger. Arun kept silent, but every word entered his heart. He could not forget the little boy clutching his mother's arm, the shopkeepers closing their shutters early, the helpless look in Mr. Kumar's eyes. He wasn't looking for a fight, but he also knew he could not live forever as a shadow. Then, one Friday afternoon, it happened. On his way back from school, Arun heard the familiar sound of engines. He turned, and there they were, the gang of bikers, slowing down as they approached him. Their leader, a tall man with sharp eyes, pointed at him and laughed. "Look who we have here," the man said, his voice carrying easily over the rumbling engines. "The quiet boy who thinks no one sees him." The others laughed, circling their bikes around him. Arun stood still, holding his school bag tightly. His heart was steady, but his mind was sharp. He remembered his father's words again: "Strength is not about showing power. But when the moment comes, you must not bow down to fear." The bikers thought they had found an easy target. But they were wrong. Very soon, they would realize the quiet boy was not what he seemed. The afternoon sun burned softly over the narrow road as Arun stood surrounded by the bikers. Their engines roared like restless animals, circling him in slow loops. Dust rose from the ground, catching in his hair and stinging his eyes. But he did not flinch. He held his bag strapped tightly, breathing steady, his father's words echoing inside: "Do not bow to fear." The leader, a tall man with piercing eyes, leaned on his bike and smirked. "You walk alone every day, boy. Brave, isn't it?" His tone was mocking, but there was a sharpness hidden within, as if he was testing Arun. The other bikers laughed loudly, throwing comments into the air. "Maybe he thinks he's stronger than us," one said. Another added, "Or maybe he's just too foolish to know better." Arun kept his head high but his voice calm. "I'm just going home." The leader tilted his head. "Going home? Not so fast." He revved his engine, the sound echoing off the buildings. "We don't like people who ignore us. You saw us before, didn't you? And you kept walking like we were nothing." The gang fell silent for a moment, waiting for his reaction. Arun's heart pounded, but he did not let fear show on his face. "I don't want any trouble," he said simply. The leader narrowed his eyes, studying him. The boy didn't shake, didn't beg, didn't even look angry. He was calm, too calm. It unsettled him, but he covered it with a laugh. "Let him go," the leader finally said, waving his hand. "He'll learn soon enough." With one final roar of their engines, the bikers sped off, leaving Arun standing in the cloud of dust. He exhaled slowly, his hands still tight around his bag strap. He had escaped the first test, but he knew this was only the beginning. They had seen him now, marked him, and they would return. When Arun reached home, Meena noticed the dust on his clothes and the silence in his eyes. "Did something happen?" she asked softly. Arun shook his head. "No, Ma. Just the road was busy." But Meena was a mother. She could feel the storm in her son's silence. She wanted to ask more, but she held back. Sometimes, she thought, Arun carried more weight in his heart than he let anyone see. That night, Arun sat by the window, staring at the moon. He thought about the bikers' laughter, the circle of engines, the sharp eyes of their leader. Fear tried to creep into his chest, but he pushed it away. Instead, he remembered his father's lessons. Control is greater than anger. Calm is greater than noise. Even in the middle of fear, hold yourself steady, and no one can break you. The next few days were uneasy. The bikers began appearing more often, and whenever they passed Arun on the road, they slowed down just enough to make their presence felt. Sometimes they shouted jokes at him, sometimes they only stared. It was like a game for them, but it was also a warning. At school, Arun's classmates noticed. "They've chosen you," one boy whispered nervously. "You should be careful." Arun didn't reply. He didn't like attention, and he didn't want anyone worrying about him. But deep inside, he was preparing. Each evening, his backyard practice grew longer. His wooden stick cut through the air with precision, his stance strong, his breathing steady. He wasn't practicing to show off, he was preparing his heart to stay calm when the time finally came. One afternoon, as Arun left school, he saw the bikers again. This time they weren't riding. They were waiting. Their bikes were parked at the corner, and they leaned against the walls, their eyes fixed on him. The leader smiled coldly. "There he is. Our quiet little friend." Arun stopped, his bag slung across his shoulder. He didn't speak. He didn't run. He just looked at them with steady eyes. The leader stepped closer. "Why don't you ever react? Most boys would be shaking by now. But you," he leaned in, his voice low. "You think you're special." Arun met his gaze. "No, I just don't want to fight." The leader stared at him for a long moment, then laughed, shaking his head. "Don't want to fight? That's fine. But remember this, boy, when we choose someone, we don't stop until we're finished." The others laughed loudly, and together they walked back to their bikes. The engines roared to life, and soon they disappeared down the road, leaving behind the echo of their threat. Arun walked home silently, but his mind was loud with thought. He knew now that the bikers would not leave him alone. They had chosen him as their target, mistaking his quietness for weakness. That evening, as he practiced again in the backyard, Meena finally asked, "Arun, why do you train so much these days?" Arun looked at her, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. "Because, Ma, the world is not always kind. And when the time comes, I must be ready." Her heart trembled at his words. She wanted to tell him he was too young to carry such thoughts. But looking at his steady eyes, she understood. He was no longer just a boy. Life was shaping him into something more. And somewhere in the distance, the roar of bikes echoed again, louder this time, as if announcing that the real storm was about to begin. The air in town had grown heavier with each passing day. People no longer spoke loudly in the markets, and children no longer played on the streets after sunset. The bikers had become a shadow that followed everyone's steps. For Arun, that shadow had grown closer. The looks, the words, the circling engines, it was all leading to something. He knew it. On a cloudy afternoon, when the sky seemed to carry its own warning, Arun left school as usual. His books weighed lightly on his back, but his thoughts weighed heavy on his heart. He had hoped for a quiet walk home, but the silence on the road told him otherwise. From the corner, the familiar roar of engines broke the stillness. The gang appeared, their bikes moving like hunters closing in on prey. They surrounded him before he could even turn the next street. The leader smirked, tilting his head. "Well, look who's here again. Our silent boy." The bikes stopped, forming a tight circle around Arun. Their laughter bounced against the walls of the narrow lane. Some of them tapped their boots against the ground, waiting for the leader's words. Arun stood tall, though his heart thumped against his ribs. He placed his bag gently on the ground, his eyes steady. I told you, he said calmly, I don't want trouble. The leader's smile faded into a cold grin. And I told you, boy, we don't stop once we choose someone. He stepped off his bike and walked closer, the sound of his boots echoing in the lane. You think you're brave because you keep standing still? You think we can't break that calm? Arun did not move. Strength is not about breaking others, he said quietly, almost as if speaking to himself. The leader paused, then burst into laughter. Did you hear that? He called out to his gang. The boy thinks he's a philosopher. The others laughed, their voices harsh and mocking. But even in their noise, there was a strange unease. Arun's steady eyes, his calmness in the middle of their chaos, it unsettled them, even if they didn't admit it. One of the bikers stepped forward, his voice sharp. Let me test him. He won't stay calm for long. The leader raised a hand. Wait. His eyes remained locked on Arun. Tell me, boy. Why don't you run? Why don't you scream like the others? Arun took a slow breath. His father's voice echoed inside him, even in fear, breathe steady. Even in anger, stay calm. He looked straight at the leader. Because fear doesn't control me. The leader's grin faded for the first time. He studied the boy in front of him, the one who should have been trembling, the one who should have begged. But instead, he stood with the quiet strength of someone who had already faced storms greater than this. Finally, the leader stepped back and gestured to his men. Enough for today. Let him go. The bikers groaned in disappointment, but they obeyed. Engines roared again, filling the air with smoke and dust. Before leaving, the leader leaned close to Arun and whispered, we'll see how long that calm lasts. Next time, boy, we won't just talk. With that, they sped away, their laughter echoing through the street. Arun bent down, picked up his bag, and walked home. His steps were steady, but inside, his thoughts raced. They would not stop. The leader had promised it, and Arun knew it was true. That evening, he practiced longer than usual. His wooden stick cut the air again and again, his feet moving with sharp precision. His mother watched from the doorway, worry clear in her eyes. Arun, she said gently, why do you train so hard? You're not at war. He stopped, sweat glistening on his forehead. Maybe not, Ma. But something is coming. And I need to be ready. She walked closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. I don't want you to get hurt. Promise me you won't go looking for danger. Arun looked at her, his eyes soft but firm. I don't look for danger, Ma. But sometimes, danger looks for us. Her heart sank at his words. She saw so much of her late husband in Arun, the same steady eyes, the same quiet strength. She feared what that strength might one day be forced to face. Night fell heavy over the town. The sound of bikes echoed faintly in the distance, and every house seemed to hold its breath. Arun lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening. He knew their threat was real. They would return, and next time, they wouldn't just surround him with words. He closed his eyes and whispered the words his father had once told him, strength is not for pride. It is for protecting. The next day would come, and with it, the storm. And though he did not want to fight, Arun understood now he would not be given a choice forever. The morning sun rose bright, but it brought no comfort to the small town. The people had learned to live in silence, always waiting for the sound of engines that could arrive at any moment. Arun walked to school with his usual calm steps, but his heart carried a quiet heaviness. He knew the bikers' threat was not empty. Their eyes, their voices, the way they circled him, everything pointed to one truth: the storm was coming closer. At school, the whispers had already begun. They're after him, some students said. Why doesn't he just hide? Others shook their heads. He's different. He doesn't scare like us. Arun ignored the whispers. He sat in his corner, reading quietly, but his mind was alert. His father's lessons returned again and again. The moment will come when you cannot walk away. When it comes, remember, control is greater than anger. Calm is greater than noise. That afternoon, the air felt strange. Even the birds seemed quieter. Arun walked home as usual, the strap of his bag firm in his hand. But halfway down the road, he heard the roar of engines. This time, it wasn't distant. It was close. Very close. The bikers appeared suddenly, turning the corner like a wave of thunder. They did not pass him this time. They blocked the road. Dust rose around them as their engines growled, and slowly, one by one, they stepped off their bikes. The leader smirked, his sharp eyes fixed on Arun. "We warned you, boy. We told you we don't stop. Today, you learn what happens when you stay too calm for too long." The others laughed, surrounding him. One biker pushed Arun's shoulder lightly, testing him. Another tugged at his skull bag and tossed it aside. Arun stood still, breathing steady, his eyes calm. "I don't want this," he said quietly. The leader leaned closer. "That's the problem, boy. We do." One of the bikers suddenly reached out, trying to shove Arun harder. In that moment, something inside him shifted. His father's words burned in his mind, "Do not fight for pride. But when the time comes, protect yourself with all you have." Arun's hand moved fast. He caught the biker's wrist, twisted it gently but firmly, and pushed him back. The biker stumbled, shocked. The laughter around them fell silent for a moment. The leader narrowed his eyes. "So the quiet boy has claws." Another biker stepped forward, swinging his arm toward Arun, but Arun sidestepped smoothly, his father's training guiding every move. His stance was steady, his breathing calm. He did not strike with anger, he only moved with precision, blocking, redirecting, making his attackers stumble. The gang was stunned. This was not what they had expected. To them, he had been just another weak target. But now, in front of their eyes, the boy moved with skill and control that none of them understood. One biker charged, but Arun shifted his weight, using his shoulder to push him aside. Another reached for him, only to be pulled forward and sent falling to the ground. Arun didn't throw heavy punches, he didn't shout, he simply moved with quiet strength, each action measured and calm. The leader watched, his grin fading into disbelief. His men, usually feared across the town, were stumbling like children before a boy they had thought was helpless. Finally, the leader stepped forward himself. "Enough," he barked. He raised his arm and swung at Arun, but Arun blocked with both hands, firm and steady. For a brief second, their eyes met, one filled with arrogance, the other filled with calm fire. Arun didn't strike back. He simply held the leader's arm in place and said, "I told you. I don't want trouble. But I won't bow to fear." The silence that followed was heavy. The gang stood frozen, shocked at the boy who had just stood against them without rage, without fear, without hesitation. Slowly, Arun released the leader's arm and stepped back. He picked up his bag from the ground, brushed off the dust, and slung it over his shoulder. His voice was steady as he spoke again. "Strength is not for hurting others. Remember that." Then, without another word, he walked away. His steps were calm, his back straight. The bikers did not follow. They stood there in silence, watching him disappear down the road. Their engines were quiet for once. The laughter was gone. The leader clenched his fists, his pride wounded. He had never been challenged like this, not by another gang, and certainly not by a quiet teenager. But deep inside, even he knew what they had just faced was not ordinary. That night, Arun returned home later than usual. His mother saw the dust on his clothes and the faint mark on his arm where one biker had grabbed him. Her heart raced. "Arun, what happened?" He looked at her gently. "Nothing, Ma. Just, the time came. And I was ready." Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled through them. She placed her hand on his head, whispering, "Your father would be proud." Outside, the town remained quiet, but word would spread soon. The bikers had met someone they could not shake. And though they laughed loudly on most nights, that night their silence carried more weight than all their engines combined. For the first time, the storm had met resistance. And the boy they thought was weak had shown them the strength they could never understand. The next morning, the town felt different. Whispers spread quickly, moving from shop to shop, from house to house. People had heard what happened. The bikers had been challenged, not by another gang or an adult, but by a quiet boy they had always overlooked. Shopkeepers who had once shut their doors early now spoke with surprise. "Did you hear? Arun, Mina's son, stood against them," one man said. Another added, "And he wasn't even angry. He just stopped them." For many, it sounded like a story too strange to believe. How could a teenager do what grown men feared to try? But those who had seen pieces of it confirmed the truth. The bikers had been humbled, and for the first time, their laughter was not heard on the streets that night. At home, Arun remained the same. He woke early, helped his mother, and walked to school quietly. But inside, his heart carried a new weight. He had defended himself, yes, but he worried what would come next. Would the bikers seek revenge? Would the town now look at him differently? At breakfast, Meena placed food on the table and sat across from him. She watched her son eat silently, her heart full of both pride and worry. Finally, she spoke softly, "The town is talking about you." Arun looked up, surprised. "About me?" She nodded. "They say you stood against the bikers. That you were calm, that you didn't let them scare you." Arun lowered his gaze. "I didn't want anyone to know. I didn't do it for the town. I only did what I had to." Meena reached across the table, gently touching his hand. "That is exactly why people respect it. You didn't fight for pride. You stood because you had no choice. That's what makes it meaningful." Her words gave him comfort, but also responsibility. He realized the town now saw him differently, not just as a quiet boy, but as someone who had faced the storm without fear. At school, the change was even clearer. Classmates who had once ignored him now looked at him with wide eyes. Some whispered his name, others stared as if seeing him for the first time. One boy approached him at lunch. "Arun," he said, his voice low, "is it true? You made them step back?" Arun gave a small smile. "I only defended myself." The boy nodded slowly, admiration shining in his eyes. For Arun, it was strange. He had never wanted attention, but now it followed him wherever he went. Meanwhile, the bikers were not the same either. They still roamed the streets, but something had changed in their voices, in their eyes. Their laughter sounded forced, their movements slower. People noticed. "They're quieter now," one shopkeeper whispered. "It's like their pride has been broken." The leader of the gang, however, carried the heaviest burden. He had always ruled with fear, certain that no one dared oppose him. But the memory of Arun's steady eyes and firm hands haunted him. He replayed that moment in his mind, the boy holding his arm, speaking with calm strength. The words, "Strength is not for hurting others," echoed louder than the roar of any engine. That night, as the gang gathered, one of the bikers finally spoke. "Maybe we should leave him alone." The leader shot him a sharp look. "Why?" "He embarrassed us. If we back down, people will think we're weak." But another biker shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe that's not weakness. Maybe it's respect. He didn't fight to show off. He didn't even try to hurt us. He just stood his ground." For the first time, silence spread among the gang. They all felt it, the quiet shame of realizing they had gone too far, and a boy had taught them the meaning of strength. Back in his small home, Arun sat by the window, looking out at the moon. His mother was sewing in the next room, humming softly. The night air was cool, yet his thoughts were heavy. He didn't regret what he had done, but he worried about what it meant. Would the bikers change? Would they come after him again? Or would they finally learn something? As he sat in the quiet, he remembered his father's voice once more: strength is not about winning or losing. True strength is when others see your courage and change their own hearts. The next day, something unusual happened. As Arun walked home, he saw two bikers at the edge of the street. They didn't circle him, didn't shout, didn't laugh. Instead, they only watched quietly as he passed. One of them lowered his eyes, almost in shame. Arun didn't speak, and neither did they. But in that silence, a shift had begun. At home, Meena noticed her son's thoughtful expression. "What is it?" she asked. Arun shook his head gently. "Maybe, they are beginning to understand." She looked at him with tears in her eyes. "You are like your father," she whispered. "He always believed that strength could change people. And maybe you have." Arun didn't reply, but deep inside, he hoped it was true. He didn't want more fights. He didn't want revenge. All he wanted was for the fear in his town to end, for children to play freely, for shopkeepers to smile again, for his mother to sleep without worry. And perhaps, just perhaps, the bikers had started to regret their mistake. The sun rose softly over the small town, painting the streets in warm gold. Life seemed quieter now. The shopkeepers opened their doors without fear, and children played again in the lanes. For the first time in months, people walked with ease. Something had changed, and everyone knew why. Arun carried his school bag as he walked down the familiar path. Birds chirped on the trees, and the morning breeze brushed against his face. He looked like any ordinary boy, but inside, his heart carried memories of nights filled with fear and days filled with silence. That silence had been broken, not by shouts or fights, but by a simple act of courage. When he reached the corner of the market, he noticed a group of townspeople talking. They stopped for a moment to greet him with smiles. One elderly man, who had once shut his shop early out of fear, said, "Arun, you gave this town back its peace. We will never forget." Arun only bowed his head politely. He didn't want to be praised. His father had taught him that strength was never for show. It was for protection, for kindness, and for peace. But not everyone was at peace yet. The bikers still lingered in the town, though their power had faded. They no longer shouted or laughed loudly. Their rides were quieter, their eyes lowered. Each of them carried a shadow of regret. The leader of the gang, who had once stood with pride and arrogance, felt that shadow the most. For days, he had been unable to sleep. The boy's calm eyes haunted him, as if they were a mirror reflecting all his wrongs. He remembered Arun's words clearly: strength is not for hurting others. Those words had cut deeper than any wound, because they were true. One afternoon, the leader made a decision that surprised even his own gang. He told them, "We cannot continue like this. We have lost the respect of the town. And that boy, he showed us something we refused to see." Some of the bikers frowned. "What do you mean?" The leader sighed, his voice heavier than usual. "We thought power came from fear. But look at us now. We are the ones who feel small." That boy never raised his voice, never used his fists without control, and still he stood stronger than all of us. Silence filled the room. Deep down, they all knew he was right. For the first time, they felt ashamed not of being defeated, but of realizing how far they had gone down the wrong path. That evening, as the sky turned orange with the setting sun, Arun walked home from school. Halfway down the road, he saw the gang waiting. His heart tightened, but this time there was no fear in his steps. He walked calmly toward them, ready for whatever they wanted to say. The leader stepped forward, his face serious but softer than before. The town watched from a distance, curious and tense. Would this be another clash? But to everyone's surprise, the leader lowered his head. "Arun," he said slowly, "we came here to say something. We were wrong. We threatened you, and we threatened this town. But you opened our eyes. You showed us what real strength looks like." The crowd gasped. No one had ever seen the bikers speak this way. Arun stood quietly for a moment before answering. "I never wanted to fight you. I only wanted peace. My father always told me that power without kindness means nothing." The leader nodded, his voice heavy with regret. "We forgot that. And now, we carry shame for it. We can't change what we've done, but we can change what we do from now on." The other bikers lowered their heads as well, silently agreeing. For the first time, the town saw them not as loud troublemakers, but as men who had been humbled by a boy's courage. Meena, standing in the crowd, felt tears in her eyes. She saw her son not only as the boy she raised, but as the reflection of her late husband's teachings. In that moment, she felt a deep pride. The townspeople slowly stepped forward, no longer afraid. "If you are willing to change," the elderly shopkeeper said, "then you are welcome here. But remember what this boy has taught all of us." The leader nodded. "We will remember." That night, peace returned in full. The bikers, though still present, began to change their ways. Their laughter no longer carried cruelty, and their rides were no longer filled with menace. Instead, they worked quietly, trying to rebuild the trust they had lost. For Arun, life went back to its quiet rhythm. He still helped his mother, still studied hard, and still walked the same paths. But something in him had grown. He realized that courage was not about fists or fights, it was about standing firm when it mattered most, even when fear tried to hold you back. One evening, as he sat by the window, Meena placed a hand on his shoulder. "Your father would be proud," she whispered. Arun looked at the stars above, feeling their silent glow. "I only did what he taught me," he said softly. And in his heart, he knew the truth. True strength was never about being feared. It was about giving others hope, showing them light when they were lost in darkness. That was the lesson he carried, the lesson the town would never forget. And the bikers, once a symbol of fear, now carried their own reminder, a reminder of the day they threatened a teen and instantly regretted it.